Hello everyone, and welcome to tonight's scrutiny meeting. I'd like to start with agenda item 1, which is apologies for absence and substitutions.
Thank you, Chairman. We received an apology from Councillor Bentalum with no substitution.
Okay, thank you. Now item 2, which is minutes of the last meeting. Are we all happy with those, and can I have a proposer and a seconder? Thank you, Graham. And thank you. Everybody happy with those? Thank you. Item 3, declarations of interest. Okay, fair enough. If anything does spring to mind, do mention as the meeting progresses on that item. Item 4, questions on notice pursuant to Council Procedure Rule 38.
Thank you, Chairman. We received no questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we're now going to take a change round. No, I'm going to do item 5, sorry. I'm going to do item 5 first, which is a portfolio holder introduction, portfolio holder for the environment. So welcome, Councillor Bush, and over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Good evening, members, and thank you for the invitation this evening. Seems a long time overdue that as a portfolio holder to be sitting in front of this committee tonight. And I'm very pleased. There's lots of things that's going on, but just give you an overview, it's quite a diverse portfolio. If we can look at the environmental protection predominantly to start with, obviously it's dealing with all the complaints with noise, smoke, bonfires, pollution, etc., pest works, permit for certain activities, monitoring air quality, private water supply management, and that is just really a very snapshot of that area of the portfolio. Food and safety is another part that falls under my portfolio, which obviously is inspections, health and safety, inspections ships for sanitation, food control, and inspect funeral directors. That is, again, is another quick brief snapshot. But obviously one of the big areas at the moment that we're all aware of is waste and recycling. There's a lot of work that's gone on over the last year. We have now in a position, we've set up members groups, we've had waste board, and we've been reviewing the existing contracts and as to move forward, potentially because of the legislation that's changes, and the contract we've got is quite old. Obviously it's 12 years old, it's been added, 12, 14 years old, and obviously lots of things have changed. So the officers have been working very hard with outside experts and consultants with ELGA to help to actually develop the principles of what we need to move forward. We've also appointed solicitors to look at the legal aspects of what the contracts will be looking like potentially, and also legislation which is continually changing under the Environmental Act. And we've also now have another professional partner on board which is looking at the final specification, working with our officers. There's been a great deal of work, a tremendous amount of input that's come through from the members group, as well as the waste board. And there is a report going to Cabinet on Friday, recommending we're now at a stage where we'll be going to tender on the principles that have been determined on this contract going forward for 2026. As we know, it's the waste, recycling, and also the street sweeping. So it's the two contracts trying to be combined to one. And as we're looking at the outline of it now, we're seeing that potentially glass is going to be a part of that collection. But I don't want to go into much detail tonight, because there's going to be another time when I'll be able to give you some really more detailed information of where we're going with that. So the principle is after Friday, from the Cabinet recommendations, is to go forward now with the tender. We've gone through that process with procurement of Essex, that we're going out to tender. We've already had some interest through the PIN for contractors, in addition to the one we already have a relationship with. These contracts, as we know, are long term, and they have to be, be thoroughly looked at in respect of we're trying to forecast forward. of what we're going to be doing, because these are 8-year contracts with potentially 8-year extension. This is this is a long time, and things change within that space. So the other thing we suffer with, and it's a positive way compared to many other councils, where it's very easy to determine collection, recycling, and disposal because they're in towns and general. But we have peripheral. We have this great thing called the coast. And it's a variance where people come and visit, and it's fantastic. So how do you build that into your cost mechanisms is very difficult. And that's what makes it more complex in turn make certain we can get it right as best as we can. It's value for money for the residents. It's providing a service that is actually statutory, meeting its obligation. So there's all them elements to it. But very comfortable, very comfortable going forward that we've got a great team in-house as well as external partners, and I feel assured that we'll get something that's giving value to our residents going forward, and that at this stage is where we're at. Hopefully come the end of the year we'll be in a position where we'll have something in front of everybody with some ideas or not the ideas, but the prices from the tender, which we know we can start to move forward with, because the actual mobilisation and activation takes time with the vehicles and the size of the authority, and where we're going with that. So really exciting time. If you can really be excited about waste, yeah, I am. So that's that aspect. Also, what's just been published recently is in terms of the dog issues, we've got the PSPO for dog failing, long overdue. We've been pushing that for some time. We've gone out for a consultation, gone through the right procedures with that, and now this order's now is on in a public press release that dogs on leads, £100 spot fines for failing, and if not collected. So let's get some enforcement really working now. So that's there in the public space now. Another part of the service in my portfolio is obviously something that we just can't avoid. And we love our coast, and it's coastal protection. There's lots of elements of that. We are considering strategies at the moment, how we're dealing with coastal erosion, how we're looking to protect a very precious part of what we've got in a district. So that's another part of my portfolio. And the final part is that climate change falls apart within this, and carbon reduction. And I'm working with the officers at the moment. We've got a members group that's actually providing input in how we address this for the 24-27 commitment for an action plan, climate action plan. Obviously been government changes. We're reviewing that, who's changed with the Minister of State for energy security and net zero. So we are reviewing that at the moment. But for me, it's always been, I'm very much a energy efficient focused person, and to me energy efficiency is the important part. Carbon reduction is linked, but most important for the district is that we've got to make certain that whatever we do in new projects, existing environments and assets, that we manage it very cost effectively with new programs, new projects that are energy efficient moving forward. So that's a really interesting challenge, and I'm welcoming that too, Chairman. So that's really a very brief snapshot of where we're at. Okay.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Does anyone have any questions? Thank you, Councillor Doyle.
Thank you for that, Mike. I just wanted to know, when you were talking about going out to tender, do we look at local businesses or do we look nationally?
What we do, we have to follow a procurement process, and that procurement process is through what they call a PIN. Something was pretty new to me, not being in the public sector. So we went out to the market at first instance, and we had 4 or 5 suppliers that have come back to us that's been reviewed and asked questions at this stage. When we go out to tender, I understand it'll be a public document again, and there'll be other people that may not have come to the first level of interest that will be permitted to actually make an application to apply. But we are talking about a contract of significant value, significant time. And if an existing envelope is 7 million a year, I mean, where we can keep it within that window of cost is we'll see where that comes back. But I think the big thing for us, and you're absolutely right, is that how we review those costs and when it comes back and through the process that we've been advised on through competitive dialogue, is that when the tender comes back, is that it might be very ambitious in terms of the delivery service to meet statutory obligations. So when we review that, there will be a committee and a panel to look at maybe areas that we need to chop and change and value engineer, because that's generally what happens in competitive dialogue. So that's where we are. So to answer your question, is it local? Well, what local people can provide probably £7-8 million a year waste contract is the question you probably would ask. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions? Councillor Harris.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you for that presentation, Councillor Bush. A question for you. I've seen it online, particularly as I've just come back off of holiday, and there was lots of sort of discussion online about the new sort of textile collection, and residents voicing opinions that they were worried about charities losing out as a result of that. Is it possible that you could offer some comment on that and perhaps offer reassurance to residents that it isn't going to affect local charities? Thank you.
Well, something I can come back to you, Councillor Harris. I mean, this is all pretty new to us. The tendering or the Essex Textiles organisation is providing that service to a number of local authorities. It's a question that I've been recently asked by residents as well as councillors, is what do we do with those textiles? Where does that go? And how will it affect charities? So I think that's a question I'll take away and I'll come back, if that's okay, to this committee and to members in general. Okay.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions? Councillor Steady.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Thanks for that presentation, Mike. I understand, obviously, that you're in negotiations for the new tender and etc., etc. So I would urge that somewhere along the line there be more robust action taken if the contract is not met. For instance, how many times can they miss a collection of a bin? How much are they charged? I believe at the moment they've got 28 days to put it correctly, and if they don't, then they get fined £25, I think. So are you looking to be more robust in our dealings? Because whilst we're all very nice people, we don't want to be liked, we want to be respected.
Thank you for that, Councillor Steady. Yeah, so that's a question of my own heart, really. Yeah, I'm one of the big things in the early days is how we challenge and how we monitor performance of our contractors. It's very, very key. And already with the existing contractors, obviously we've got the last period before we go into new contract in 2026. And we've already got key performance indicators now in place. We're monitoring their performance. And this is laying the foundation now when we go forward. Having spoken with our legal and Elga, who's been the sort of the guidance who gives the principles of setting up the outline of the contract, waste contract. There was one of the things that they identified too, that management, performance indicators and penalties for non-provision, and that becomes a total management issue going forward. You're absolutely right. For as I'm concerned, this contract going forward will be, it's a definite partnership where we are monitoring exactly what they are delivering. And really, we're going into the legality of clauses, but we'll hopefully have a relationship. We're all in it together, whoever that contractor will be. It's in their interest, how they deliver, because if penalties are involved, no one wants that in a contract. Once we start looking at contract conditions, well, we might as well just give up. So we want to try to build that up from early doors, so we agree with those performance management indicators. But you're absolutely right, it's key. It's absolutely key that we actually ensure that we are delivering on our promises, as we've said. So I really appreciate that question, because It's so important going forward. Thank you very much.
Sorry, Chair, could I just have a supplementary on that?
Yes, please. Do.
And also just going on then, because obviously over the years the houses have increased, dog ownership seems to have increased, that puts pressure on. So is there wriggle room in there for us to take that into consideration? Not necessarily for the next, but 2 years, 3 years after that.
Again, it's an absolute model question. Absolutely right. What's our district going to be look like in 8 years' time, 4 years' time, in terms of its growth? Yeah, so with that, again, that's all a part of the specification, how the contractor deals with that. And I think the competitive dialogue is a crucial way of that, because it's very open where we are, where we're going, and what we need to do statutory. In terms of the recycling elements are going to change, the way it's dealt with now, and the way we are going forward in 26, there are changes. So having the professional team on board that actually right inspect that do this for other authorities have faced lots of other questions that you said, and we've actually raised it ourselves. So going forward again, this is a part of will be within the specification. Okay.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor Harris.
Thank you, Chairman, again. You mentioned the system you've got in place now regarding sort of dog fouling. And I think everyone would agree that it's quite disgusting and needs to be stamped out. And any owner of a dog that allows that is absolutely barking mad. But how many enforcement officers have we got that will enforce that? How many people do we actually have trying to enforce that? And since it started, how many fines have actually been introduced or given out? Thank you.
We've been for a consultation, and just to sort of come back to you there, Councillor Harris, is that obviously this comes into place, I understand, for 1st of August. There's a document's been signed off. There are obviously signs. It's now going to be to actually make it more visible to people what's going to be the outcome. In terms of the resource, maybe I could pass that to the Director of Operations to see where we are with that.
Thank you. Currently we have 2 officers who carry out enforcement in relation to dog fouling, but we are exploring other options in relation to enforcement and how we can sort of merge teams together to be able to produce a better enforcement offer, if you like. I think the thing with this is that having the PSPO in place allows us, where we can, to actually enforce those rules in a better way than we have been in the past.
So those current 2 officers that we have, they're covering the whole of the district. And are we sort of led to believe really that actually it's the threat of potential fines that is more of the disincentive for people for this to happen? The chances of actually being caught though is pretty slim, isn't it?
I mean, you're right. Yeah, we've never had a huge number of dog wardens. It's generally always been around 2, and there is always that element of threat, of course, that if you're not controlling your dog, if you're allowing your dog to mess all over the place without collecting it, and you do get caught, well, we've got stronger powers to deal with you if we catch you. The reality is we have a very large district that has a lot of rural space, and actually, if we wanted to enforce across the entire district, we'd have to employ a huge workforce.
No, I do understand. It's very difficult, so thank you. Cheers.
Yes, thank you. Any other questions? No? Okay. Okay. If there's is there anything you'd like to add?
Chairman, no, thank you. I will give updates continually. I think it's very important that we communicate this through, particularly regarding the waste. It affects everybody in the district. So every time we have an update, that we see involved to get it out there, because obviously the residents are beginning to understand that things may begin to change with that. So communication for me is very important now as we move into this next cycle in terms of moving forward with the tender, and there'll be the next stage of procurement and mobilisation. So, yeah, thank you very much anyway, Chairman.
Okay, that's absolutely fine. I know you mentioned at the beginning it had been a while before you were asked. Well, if you'd ever like to come along, just drop us a line and we'll be happy for you to come back. And Ian Davidson, Chief Exec, would like to say something.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to say is that in terms of the waste contract, we will be having all member briefings. It's so important that all our members are aware of the once we're going to the implementation and the options, in order that when you get asked questions by your individual constituents, then you are able to answer them. So we will be having all member briefings, which will give you full details of the rollout as to what will be coming forward, and also around the timing. So again, you'll be aware, and then you'll be able to respond to residents accordingly.
Thanks very much for that. Does anyone else have any comments on this item? Okay, thank you very much. We'll just take a few seconds. Would you like to stay, or? Yeah. Yes, up to you entirely. Feel free. We will now make a slight change to the agenda so that we can let anyone go if they want to after the next item. So we're going to move to item 7 next, which is spendles. Obviously, we've all had the reports and we've all had a chance to see those reports. And I know members have got questions, and I've got a few as well. But before that, I just wondered, does the Chief Exec or Cabinet members or leader want to open with any comments?
To be fair, Chair, it's your meeting, so if you want to just launch into it, I'm happy to take that. As if you said the report's been read, then it's fine.
Okay, thank you very much. So we did have a pre-meeting and we came up with some questions, and I know different members will ask different questions. The first question up is from myself, but I've done a little bit of work on the timeline, and I'd like to tag that onto or ask that question as I go down the timeline. So just to catch Councillor Smith out, if you'd like to be the first one up.
Thank you very much. If I could ask the leader, Councillor Stevenson. In this particular case, the total revised scheme costs shown on page 30 of our papers is some 60% higher than the approved scheme budget shown on the same page. We have major schemes underway and in the pipeline, many of which will be funded by fixed sum grants from government. Do you worry that this level of underestimation and management of a major contract will impact on grant funders? Is it possible we'll lose funding, and will we be left picking up the costs of grant funded schemes that overrun on costs by something like 60%?
If I miss anything, you'll have to ask me to. I'll take the last first. Grant funding, I think under a new administration, we kind of don't know where we are. At the moment, we're still waiting for direction from government around certain grants and bits and pieces coming forward. The initial 60%, I mean, for me, that was it's not a place where we started in the wrong place. Basically, the 60% didn't suddenly just appear. It happened over a length of time around, and things like, we had some certain political events that blew up the economy, and construction prices went up, and delays happened because of things like theft and that on the site. Will it happen? I think invariably, especially when you get grants, the length of time it takes, and that's normally not so much us, but government, they will sit there and issue us money to a certain amount of money, and we've seen it in pretty much all government grants. The time it takes them to give it, the price naturally goes up with things like inflation and bits like that, and if there is any worldwide economic things that drive it, it will go up even faster. There's always a gap, which feels like it has to be filled sometimes, but working efficiently, best value for money, we tend to do very well around this one. Unfortunately, Spendles just went wrong. So, did I catch everything?
I think there are other questions that will continue along that. So yeah, that's fine. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. The next question is from Councillor Newton.
Thank you, Chair. My question is to the Chief Exec, Ian Davidson. On page 35 of the Spendall supplement, it mentions 3 first initial steps, namely a formal review around spendals, a directive to senior managers around financial management and the creation of a new officer project board. Can you set out for us whether those 3 steps have been implemented in full? If not, when will they be fully implemented, and whether other appropriate steps have been implemented? Thank you.
Thank you very much for your question. First of all, to say is that it is quite unusual in order for myself or any chief executive to take such strong action. And I take that action is because we take very seriously when something goes wrong. I think that this sort of scheme, I've got an expression where we say is that, you know, you want to celebrate success, you don't want to be justifying success. So the right sort of thing in terms of the homelessness situation, what we do in order to deliver against the homelessness is absolutely key. And if I can just pick up slightly, and I'll just come to your question in a second, but it's just in terms of the background for that. If I can pick up the point is that we have a total cost of £1.9 million for our homelessness, which is a phenomenal sum and is increasing. A number of councils now, it's taking up to 50% of their net revenue budget. So it's a significant cost to us, and excuse me, the size and scale of scheme is important because the outcome and the delivery, I don't think any member would say is the wrong one. And indeed, it will reduce our costs of homelessness by 274,000. It's an estimate at the moment because obviously once it's up and running, we can review that. But that's the sort of figure which is anticipated in terms of the cost. Our net figure is around £800,000 for the cost. So there's some really big costs in there. I think the key is, though, is that whenever we do schemes like that, we need to get it right in terms of our process and our procedures. And the reason why I sent out the instruction to all senior managers, which has already gone in answer to your first question, is because no matter how good and what we're doing, we need to be able to celebrate it and not have to justify it, and that's why we're doing that. So the answer, so in terms of the direction gone out, it has done. In terms of the project board, we're in the process of setting that up. If I'm honest with you, there was a little matter that got in the way, which, if you look at the data, towards the end of May, towards the end of when this came out, and then obviously at the end of May, and we've been running into the obviously the election, which has occupied us fully. So we are in the process of setting up the board in order to monitor and manage projects. In terms of the board, it's interesting. What I would say is that it's not just about it being a waggy finger board. Actually, we want to engage with officers who are running boards, not to take over and run them, but we want the project board to be the weathered eye for members, for us as senior officers, to turn around and say whether there is a red flag, whether there is an issue early on. If people came and said, actually, there is an overspend and there's an IFRS spendals, I honestly don't think any member would have a problem. You'd want to understand why, and actually inflation, the issues which created it, around it. The issue is about that it's done properly. It's spoken to early on to say there is an issue, there is a problem, and then actually identifying that and getting the due correct governance in place to agree the expenditure or not. That's a member's decision, as the case may be. So I think that in terms of taking that forward, that's part of the board is actually people coming saying we have an issue with a scheme and actually flagging that up early, but also it being an opportunity to monitor, particularly our larger schemes, and saying to portfolio holders which are your key ones, which are the key projects to manage. In order to manage those schemes, we have the project board there which will support us collectively as members and officers in order to try and ensure that will not happen again. I say try and ensure because hand on heart, you can never promise that not to happen again. What is key in anything that goes wrong is it is the way in which you then manage it. It's always what you do when something goes wrong. It's never that nothing will ever go wrong. So I think that's the. I'm sorry. What was the other part of this one? What haven't I covered? Or did I cover it all? I did. All right. Sorry. Okay.
Sorry.
Oh yes, the review. Sorry.
Showing,
Yes.
yeah.
Sorry. Yes. Apologies. Thank you. I was thinking I'd only done 2 out of 3, and I couldn't think which one I hadn't done. Yes, the review. I think that, and it actually goes along to what I was just saying. When it does go wrong, we need to learn the lessons. We need to understand why. So in order to put in place any measures or issues that, in order to make sure it doesn't happen again. Sometimes those are about culture. Sometimes those are about making sure around compliance rather than necessarily the system is wrong in order for the compliance. And I can only tell you what that will be once it comes out. The other part of it, if I'm really honest, will be also to be looking at the actions of officers. I won't report back into a public that we'll deal with those if there are issues to deal with. We'll deal with those through the council's staffing procedures. But where there's the issues of what happened in terms of why that didn't happen in the process, then yes, certainly we will come back to you on that one. And that is underway. Sorry, in the last part, that is underway.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have any follow-up on that? No? Okay, that's fine. So next question is Councillor Doyle to the Chief Executive.
To be fair, I think you've pretty much answered it. Yeah, sorry, Ian. There are recommendations considered by the Cabinet. Can I point you to recommendation F that the Cabinet put forward? This references internal control arrangements, the ones that are in place currently, and the need for these to be followed. Given this experience and the experience of Spendle's project, is it your view that these internal controls are fit for purpose? And I think you have answered that in part with the setting up of the project board.
No, thank you for that, and I'll very happily answer those. I do think they're fit for purpose. People have to follow them, bluntly. You know, we've gone through and had a look. I'm not going to say until we've had the review that there's not anything which we may not need to update or put in place. But I think fundamentally the governance arrangements, which normally are, and I'll give you an example going back over a period. So, for example, in terms of some of the work which we did around the cliffs or around the seafronts, you know, we've had a good history of spending significant funding and actually delivering on time and in budget. The review will look at and saying are there issues in there which need to be amended or looked at. But also the other part about it is about ensuring the culture is that people are compliant with those rules, and they'd see them as working with those rules and not those rules getting in the way. So, you know, I'll say now, you know, I apologise for that error happening. I find it, I'll be blunt with you, I know we're being recorded, but I'm still going to be blunt and say it is, I find it hugely frustrating because, as I said earlier, I want to celebrate the successes. This is a good scheme for our residents, and if I can just, if I may, Chairman, just sort of just say one thing around this, is slightly off the question, is that when we put in place homelessness provision in our own district, and this goes across all the council, because this is started in the previous administration and it's followed through. When we put these in place, it's about our residents having the support and infrastructure of being locally, rather than having to be shipped off to far-flung places because there's no accommodation in the district. But the frustration for me is that we're coming and talking about the process to get there rather than celebrating the scheme.
And the last question from me, which you've answered really, is what do we do now? And I guess you've set up the project board, which I'm really pleased to hear about, because I think that's an excellent way of monitoring and mitigating as things happen. And I do think you're right, and I think we need to look at the big picture sometimes and see what the end result is going to be. So, and how will we stop it happening again? And you've answered that.
Thank you for that. And the other thing I would say is that we're also having a senior managers forum session. So we were following up my strong instruction to our senior managers with a senior managers forum, which the Section 151 officer, the monitoring officer, and myself will be attending to reinforce those messages, and to also find out, are there any issues as to why they're not going to be following that through. But I will be certainly very strongly and proactively ensuring that we don't.
Thank you. Do you have any other questions on that? Follow up? No? Okay then. Next one is Councillor Honeywood.
Report. Oh, yeah. It's on. Right. On page 30 of the committee's report, it states a total of just short of 630k of binding instructions issued to the contractor for this project. Can you help us as to how binding instructions are issued and the limits on the issuing of instructions when there isn't the budget to fund all of these instructions? Sorry.
That's right. So normally in a contract, instructions would be issued as variation orders or architect's instructions, and those would look at budgets and ensuring that there was sufficient budget to be able to meet that demand. I'm sort of reluctant to go too much because there is a review happening, but that's generally how I would expect it to happen. Exactly what happened here, we won't find out until the review is completed.
When managing large contracts, what measures are in place to make sure they are delivered in accordance with approved specifications on time and to budget? Can you say why these measures didn't work in this case? If you cannot say why, how can we be confident the same issues won't repeat themselves?
So again, there's a review going on, which means I can't answer specifically about the Spendles thing, but as Ian has said, there are sufficient procedures and rules in place to ensure that projects are delivered to time and budget. And Ian mentioned a couple of quite significant projects that have had exactly those things, where we've done the seafront work, cliff stabilisation and the beach replenishment, all significant contracts that were delivered to time and budget.
Thank you. Do you have any other points you'd like to ask? Thank you. Yeah.
Sorry. I'll even add to the, even though it's not me, I'm still like, if you don't mind, just chip in on that one. It's a really good question, because the issue around making sure that actually how it's complied is how people are going to comply with it, and it goes back to my point around that reinforcement of and the change of, and the culture, because those mechanisms are in place, and it's about making sure that those mechanisms are followed. And I think that some of that is going to be around that reinforcing that, but also I think, and we've also looked at, and I'll give you an example, the Levelling Up Fund, which is a significant fund, which is £20 million. We're actually at the moment recruiting and looking at putting additional resources in place in order to ensure that is delivered and have compliance within that one. So you'll have seen that you'll see in the cabinet on Friday there is additional fund put in to specifically resource additional capacity there for that.
Okay, thank you for that. The next question is Councillor Smith, to Corporate Director, Operations and Delivery.
Thank you. Damien, what qualifications, knowledge and training requirements are there for those responsible for preparing specifications, reviewing received tenders and managing contracts such as Spendles?
So in relation to qualifications, my surveyors are trained to degree level, and we have been going through a process over a number of years to grow our own. So they all go through that degree level process. As part of that is understanding how you would write a specification and how you would deliver on it. On the procurement element of things, we go through Essex County Council's procurement, so they would guide us through that procurement process. They would make sure that that side of things has gone through due process and that we're comfortable in placing that work with the organisation company that provides the best financial project for us, if you like. In relation to how the projects are managed, some of that comes through experience, some of that comes through previous officers' experience, and I would expect that more junior officers would look to senior officers for guidance to see how they're managing their projects, and senior officers would be keeping an eye on that project to make sure that they are being managed appropriately.
Do you have a follow-up at all? Okay, it'll be Councillor Steady, and there is Councillor Steady, myself, and then yourself again. But if you could do your two, because I've tagged mine into
okay.
timeline.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so it's to the Corporate Director, Operations and Delivery. Damien, come on down. I realise the question I'm going to ask has probably been covered by other areas, but I'm in a very benevolent mood. I'll give you one chance to put in one thing forward to add value to the question and the answer to the question. Does that make sense? Okay. Oh, well, I'll give you the question and then I'll explain. Okay. So, on page 13 of the report, there is a list of items variously discovered or changed following the specification for the project. Things like fire compartmentation, drainage, water supply, electrical supply and fire doors. Should we be concerned about the development of specifications for other major projects at this council? Now, I realise that could be covered by what the Chief Executive has sort of stated, but is there anything, and you don't have to answer this question because I'm put on the spot, but is there anything you think which could add value? Because it could be just a straightforward yes or no, couldn't it? Yes, I think it is going to. So, is there anything, or do you not wish to answer?
Sorry, I'm slightly lost as to, are you saying is there anything that we could do to ensure we pick these things up in future?
Yeah, because obviously the Chief Executive has obviously given a very comprehensive presentation at the moment. So is there anything you think that there would be something to add value to the answer to the question and also what the Chief Executive has already said?
So I think moving forward in any project, yes, you know, we will learn lessons from what's happened at Spendles. But that's not to say that other projects would have the same issues. You know, we've got other projects running. Honeycroft's a very good example of a project that's running extremely well to time, to budget, and we have no issues in relation to that. The development of staff and the development of their experience, I suspect will come out of the review, and that's one of the things we'll look at, is how we focus on that, how we get that attention to the detail within the specification to ensure that we don't miss some of these things in the future. So absolutely, I think experience will tell us that we will need to explore what we've done, to keep an overview and an eye on what we're writing in future to make sure that we don't miss things. And that'll be looked at as part of anything coming forward about how we have that focus, how we have that attention to detail.
Good. Thanks for the answer. Very good.
Before your second question, Councillor Steady, I think Councillor Harris wanted a clarification or raise an issue on that one.
Thank you, Chairman. And I was still in mid-air while they was having this meeting and all these questions, so I just read the report and wrote my own questions down. But I picked up on the same issues that Councillor Steady has mentioned here, and you know, the 7 items there. I mean, I have a few questions surrounding this because I see this as potentially as one of the issues why there's been this increase in costs. And I think you said earlier, or it might be in Chief Executive Ian Davison, that said that this happened. It didn't all happen overnight. This happened over a length of time. So the question, you know, one of the questions will be, what was that time period? And I'd also like to say, well, who was reviewing that? Whose attention was that brought to when these 7 items, let's say, were they brought to anybody's attention? Was it brought to the portfolio holder's attention? Is there a process in place to sit and review that with the portfolio holder? And the other question really is to understand as to who managed this project. You know, is there a principal designer, a surveyor? You know, who was the building control? Was it internally or was it external? And also, you know, the fire officer, because there's a couple of fire instances here, number 1 and I think it's number 5. You know, there needs to be a fire strategy before you know, this commences as part of the, you know, and the part of the building control officer's review before the work commences. So, you know, who were the individuals responsible for this? And once these items were found, whose attention were they brought to?
I think the Chief Executive was going to answer that one for you.
If I can answer the first part and then Damien part of it. I think you had sort of some inspiration whilst you were in your flight, if you were kind of reading those and kind of coming up with questions, because I think one of the key things you pick up in that list is that the spec, when we looked at it, could probably have been better in terms of picking up some of these points. And I think that that's quite legitimate to say around some of those. Some of that potentially could have been foreseen. Hindsight, I know, is a wonderful thing, but actually, in terms of saying about the spec, I think that's a perfectly legitimate thing to say, and that's also a learning point about how do we make sure on a project we are comprehensive enough to completely spec that out. And so I think that's a perfectly legitimate point. In terms of the fire doors, that's a slightly nuanced, and the reason I'm going to answer that one is because I signed off the additional £60,000 for the fire doors, and the reason for that is that after the meeting which you had as members and the information you had, it was then that building control said the fire doors that are not there are not of a standard which was acceptable, and therefore they had to be replaced. And I took that decision because I do not want a Grenfell or another one in which our residents are put at risk. So there is no way that I'm not going to sign off £60,000 in order for that. So the fire door issue was less able to be foreseen in one aspect because there were fire doors there, but the building control said that they were not up to the standard of today. What you could ask and say is that around that kind of that spec and that timing of it, set that, but I think that was ultimately the right thing to happen, and the decision, which I took and made, was signed off and was made a decision was made. just to check on that one.
Good, thank you for that. Councillor Steady, your second. Oh, hasn't finished yet.
Sorry, thanks. I don't think I can name officers, and there is a review going on, as we've said. So in answer to your question, the building control issue was covered internally and through another authority whose services we're using at the moment to provide building regulations. Changed some time ago, so you don't tend to have a fire officer come around and inspect premises anymore like they used to, or license them. That's generally done under risk assessments and done by the organisation itself. I think I've already said there are lessons to be learnt in how we write specifications and the quality and the detail of that specification, but that was also done internally as well. So that was done through our own officers who prepared the specification and then project managed the project as well.
So I understand fire risk assessment when you have a business, a building, etc. But are you saying that during construction stage and design, it hasn't got to get fire approval?
Fire would be a consultee on any application for it, but it would be the building inspectors who would carry out the inspection of the work, and that's what they did with the fire doors, and then it's them that brought that to our attention.
And sorry, there was one other question that I had, which was regarding the review of this. So when these items, whatever they are found, and it's already been said a couple of times that it happened over a length of time, which, you know, if you can clarify what that length of time is, I think that the question is who was responsible for discussing that with officers to see whether that project was on time, on target, within budget, and does the portfolio holder hold these regular reviews with officers regarding these projects, and if so, how often, and if not, why not?
think Mrs. Hastings wants to come in on this one.
Before the officers or members respond, I would just like to remind the committee that we're in Part A. And so I think the principle of the question is about the process, not necessarily who at this stage. As indicated, there is an internal review going on. Otherwise, we'll have to go into Part B.
Councillor Baker.
Chairman, I'm quite happy to answer how often I meet with my corporate director. It's once a week, and it's on a Monday, and we spend 2 hours speaking about everything. So Spendles has always been on my agenda with Damien, if that answers part of the question.
And I guess the second part is when it should be brought to our attention, officers should feel comfortable that they can bring it to senior officers' attention as and when they believe things are not going in the way it should be going. I think the report's clear that we found out around February time of this year that things were beginning to unravel and not travel in the direction that we wanted. From that time, we pushed for more information, and then you'll have seen the timeline that travelled through to reports being written up until where we are today.
Sorry, so just to get clarity then, we've heard from the portfolio holder that he has a weekly meeting. These costs build up over a period of time. So are we saying that this information was, for whatever reason, kept from the portfolio holder until February?
Councillor Harris, I'm going to have to ask you to kind of hold that question, because that's exactly what one of the issues of the review is, looking at what those timing is. Can I just clarify one other thing in part of your question is, in coming back, and I think I said this earlier, but I will reiterate it, we won't name individual officers. That will be a part of the staffing process. What we will say is where those failings were, and some of that approach which we're taking to ensure it doesn't happen again.
I fully accept that. Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Steady, your final question?
Yep, thanks, Chair. Yeah, this is for the Assistant Director Building, Public and Realm. Andy White. Hi, Andy. Very similar to the question which I put forward to Damien, and both themes are reputational. So again, if there's anything you feel you can add value when you give the answer. So at the meeting of the Cabinet on the 24th of May, it was reported that the Spendles project was due to be completed on the 15th of August 2024. That's on page 26 of the report. By this meeting, that timescale had shifted to the 4th of September, page 8 of the report. Can we have confidence in this revised date?
Thank you, Councillor Steady. The job's not over until the job's over, and therefore it is possible that there will be some additional delay. As we stand by at this moment, I don't know what that delay could be, and work is progressing as it's planned to be, and the contractor and ourselves all expect it to finish on schedule on the 4th of September. That doesn't mean, of course, that the facility will be open on that date, because there'll be furniture, fittings, various things that need to be installed by our own teams before the building can be fully operational. The part of your question about do I think there could be anything done to improve future performance? Yes, I do. The details of that are subject to the internal review, and I don't really think it's the right thing to go into my thoughts right now, because they've been fed into the view along with everybody else's, and the team involved will consider them all and come to a conclusion and advise everybody when it's done.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yes, so you've given us the assurance that you will be looking at future, and hopefully then we will be able to checks and balances to run through the rest of the project. So thanks very much for your answer.
Okay, thank you very much for that. As I say, I know Councillor Harris has got some some questions. But what I tried to do was put together a timeline of events so I could get straight in my mind. And I've deliberately looked at information I believe is in the public domain, so it tends to be cabinet based, just so the events make sense to me, and a lot of it is confirmation. So my understanding is that work started on the project on 16th of October 2023. And the first time it appeared in, shall we say, we'll say council chamber, but council meetings, was on the HRA budget speech, which was on the 13th of February. And at that point, the leader said that there was a favourable impact on the council's finances around this project and homelessness. So it's clear at that point he was unaware of any problems. The next key date to me is the 4th of March. This is in effect a jump back. On the 24th of May at Cabinet, Councillor Baker told us that he discussed this with the corporate director and had been talking about it ever since. So I imagine the 4th of March is the date that you, Councillor Baker, became aware of the issue. On the 5th of March, which was the Scrutiny Committee the next day, I raised that again. As you know, I've had concerns about this project for quite some time. And I asked the question, and my wording was, before it was going to open in April, we're now talking later this year, do you know if we are going to incur any additional cost for that? And your response was, I can't comment on that at the moment. I can get you an answer, but at the moment, obviously, we are looking at an extension of time. So there may be costs attached to that, but they may well be, I can't say right now, which is a fair enough response because we're talking one day later than you've known. And that obviously ties in with the question one, which was at the committee's meeting on the 5th of March 2024, you were asked about spendles, the timetable for it to be delivered and the cost. Your response at that time was that you did not know, you did not have the project spend costs at the time. Did you know at that stage that there was considerable amounts of unauthorised expenditure?
So there's a lot to take in there, so apologies if I miss anything for you. I'm not trying to catch anyone out. I'm trying to get a clear, straight of events. If I miss something you've asked, please forgive me. So I knew at the end of February that there was a potential problem. I came to this committee on the 5th of March to introduce my portfolio. At that time, as far as I recall, we'd also had a theft on the site that had put the programme back by 2 to 3 weeks. We weren't sure how long that was going to be. At that stage, no, I was not aware of the cost, and I wasn't aware of the total cost until I returned from holiday in May, because up until that time, there was no specific amount as to how much more it was going to cost. So, or what the overspend was likely to be. So there was no way that I was going to mislead this committee and guess or speculate, and especially about how long, how much longer it would take for the project to be completed. So I think I've answered most of the questions, Chairman, so if I haven't, please advise me.
Yeah, that's pretty good. The next key date to myself was the 19th of March 2024, which was the full council, where the leader made his state of tendering speech. And I asked the question: spendles, are we now hear it's overdue, but do we know if it's over budget? Can you let us know? And Councillor Stevenson, you were kind enough to respond. you said, as for spindles, that is going fine. We are hoping to see that delivered 1 month later than possible, but where we are at the moment, and I'm happy to give an update on that. My concern is that there seems to be a communication breakdown. Obviously, Councillor Baker has got concerns, but obviously you don't appear to be aware of them. Can you see where I'm coming from?
Absolutely. At the time I was talking about the delay, so we definitely knew there was going to be some sort of delay, partly because of things like the theft and things like that. So we expected some kind of delay. Obviously it got longer than we expected. As for the money, that was still in flux. So there was a question whether it was actually a problem. And what Councillor Baker said was there was a potential problem. So at that time, at the same moment, there was also still a potential problem. So I erred on the side of caution and just said, yeah, everything's going okay. I'm happy to own that. It wasn't okay. You know, as it transpired, it started to get worse, and we didn't find out until Councillor Baker got back in May. So.
Thanks very much for that. The next key date came up was on the 19th of April, was Cabinet. When I asked the question, how much are we overdue, and from a financial perspective, is there additional cost? Now, are we running over budget on that? Councillor Baker responded, he said, in regard to the first part of the question, it will be longer. I will be having a meeting with officers to clarify certain things on Monday as to a timeline, but we are overdue. August has been suggested, but I don't want to be held to that. With regard to the cost, there is likely to be further costs. What those are, I am able to tell you right now. Obviously, that again is a conversation I'll be having on Monday and going forward over the next couple of weeks. Then I'll hopefully be able to give you a much better answer, but at the moment I don't want to give a speculative amount. That would be wrong. So it seems at that point we are in the area we know things are far from where they should be. We obviously on the 15th of May we had the cabinet report published with the figure of 2.25 million was mentioned. The 21st of May we then had the late cabinet report published, which was the 2.337 million. At that cabinet meeting, I asked about it, you know it's coming, I asked about it being out of control, and you said that you'd been assured that this was the final number. That is the final number with the two bullet points. I'm sure you remember what you said. I won't go through that. But you did finish with, yes, assurances still stand. I feel very confident that is the final number. So moving to the next point, which was the 11th of June, which the Chief Executive, and he's already discussed this, he approves the additional 60,000 from the cash incentive scheme, which was under my question too. On page 10 of the Spendle supplement, it mentions a decision, budget environment, which involved approval of 60k additional expenditure on the Spendles project concerning fire doors there. This decision was dated 10th of June 2024, being just over 2 weeks after Cabinet was approving 850k additional funding from the capital reserves for this project. That makes the current overspend 960k on a tender price for this project of 1.25 million. Should we be concerned that yet more cost rises for the budget will come through? Should the 60k have been picked up in the report to the Cabinet on the 24th of May 24? Why was the 60k then an officer decision rather than a portfolio holder one?
If I can reiterate the 60,000 one, which is obviously the kind of just the straightforward the one, and then I'll pass to Councillor Stevens from the others one. The 60,000 that we were advised by Building Control after that meeting that the doors which were there were not compliant, and therefore the additional £60,000, which I agreed, because if we'd have delayed, the cost would have increased because they were on site getting it done as opposed to leaving it. So therefore it was a virement which I could make the decision. So I made the decision of the virement in order to keep the cost to a minimum and in order for the safety, which, as I said earlier, was absolutely key that we put to protect our residents the right materials in place. So that was why the decision was made after cabinet and why you didn't have the information in the report, because if we'd have known it, I'd have put it in there.
Okay, thank you very much for that. That leads me to my last question on the form, which was question 3, which was again to corporate director operations and delivery. On page 22 of the report, it refers to the 850k of then unauthorised expenditure on the project. To what extent did this arise due to capacity issues in the service area concerned? How do you spot capacity issues? How do you guard against them? And what immediate steps can you take when they arise?
An interesting question. Some of that, I think, with the review, I'm going to be cautious about, but capacity issues are things that we look at, and you can judge those through sickness levels, through staff coming to talk to you about the issues that they're experiencing, as well as managers obviously being aware of what's happening in their area and then pushing that information back up for discussion about how we deal with it. So ultimately it's not one thing that leads you to understand capacity issues, but multiple things that say, well, hang on a minute, this is happening, that maybe not be going right, people are going off sick, how do we deal with it? So generally that's how I would look for capacity issues, and then people to report it back so that we can look at how we would address those issues.
If I may add to that, Councillor Honeywood, you raise a really good point about capacity, because, and I'm going to sort of be not around this specific one, but about homelessness. The homelessness challenge for district councils is ever growing. We have no control on it whatsoever. We have no control in terms of what we can and can't do. So the issues where, in terms of managing a service, anybody runs a business or manages a service which you can't control the numbers, and they're legally required to carry on doing it, is almost impossible. In terms of our capacity to therefore put in place additional resource, it's a good question about how do we make sure we manage that, and when you've got no ability to be able to say, actually, sorry, we're full now, we haven't got the capacity. We have a legal requirement to complete. So that challenge to the district council, public sector around those sorts of services are really difficult. In terms of our individual projects, then, in order to try and ameliorate that impact, is then where we try and put in place the right things. And as you know, in this case, part of that was done incorrectly, but to ameliorate that impact, that was the challenge around adding capacity in order to address the issues, which is a much wider issue for local government around homelessness.
Okay, thank you very much for that. I've got one final question, which I think might be helpful at the end. And before then, I know Councillor Howard's just going to jump in.
Thank you, Chairman, for allowing me to jump in. It's just, something that was mentioned earlier. Again, this is about learning lessons from this. I think that's the important thing. I think I'd also like to state that the value of this project in terms of the need for the homelessness, it's invaluable. It's a fantastic project, and I fully support the project 100%. I think it's just a case of getting best value for our residents and learning lessons from that. So I think you know, there were lots more questions I had, but I've stopped now because you keep coming back and saying that there's an investigation or there's, so I'll keep all of that, and hopefully they'll be all answered in the summary when it comes. But what would be interesting in that learning experience as well is these 7 items, back to these again, and the Chief Executive has already said that the fire doors were £60,000, is whether or not we could get a breakdown of how much each of those 7 were. And the reason why I say that is because, you know, number 2 is the electrical supply was found to be inadequate. Now, if that could be a major part of that cost, if the you know, the electricity company decides that they've got to upgrade all the power, etc. So there could be a huge amount of cost in there, which would explain some of the costs, and some of the other costs there, you know, the drainage, etc., may not be so expensive. So it depends on really where those lessons need to be learned. I mean, in terms of the drainage, the question I would ask is was there a CCTV survey done before? But I'm not going to get into the detail now. But it's just understanding what those costs were. I think that would be useful. Thank you.
If I may, Chairman, thank you for that. I think that in terms of your question, and having a breakdown and understanding that, because actually it will help members to understand what the particular issues were, I think is a very valid point. I don't want to kind of over-raise in terms of expectations. What comes back is not going to be Encyclopedia Britannica sort of size. It's going to be focused on kind of the what went wrong and what are our key lessons. So it may not go into every minutiae detail. But in terms of your questions about the 7, then yes, I think that's a perfectly legitimate question to come back to and respond around what are some of those issues. I think we've got some of those figures. So, for example, the fire door is £60,000, so we know what that is. But some of those other ones are perfectly good. I also just want to say, I'm sorry to preempt if they're going to this chairman, but I want to thank the committee, because actually it is really good to have this sort of question, this level of kind of the scrutiny around what happened, in order to test ourselves, in order to say what are those issues that we, as you rightly say, Councillor Harris, don't happen again on future schemes. So very good sort of set of probing and questions in terms of understanding the different aspects around it, and I'm sure we'll follow that up at a subsequent meeting following on from the review.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone else have any questions? Graham?
Just one final thing. Was any pressure put on the whole scheme with unforeseen circumstances in the pipeline which led to decisions or actions being taken before they were appropriate?
The honest truth is I don't know until we've had the review. So in terms of pressure put on, I think one of the key pressures is, as a general one, is the pressure around homelessness, is the pressure around delivering the scheme. As Councillor Harris said, and as others said, and as previously those have said, the importance of delivery of that, but not pressure in terms of saying a pressure to say somebody does something inappropriate or doesn't follow the rules. No, the general pressure on us as a council to get it to get a scheme in place there is, because of course our homelessness challenge, but that does not mean to say that people don't follow the appropriate governance and rules in order to deliver what is the right scheme.
Thank you. I think Mrs. Hastings wants to come in on that one.
Thank you. I was just going to say, with regard to the decisions that have been made, and obviously I'm referring to decisions that have been made and published, they are all documented within the reports. So if a formal decision was made and published, whether it's referred to in the Cabinet report or the supplemental, the addendum, or the one that's come before you. So both myself and Mr. Barrett, we looked at what decisions were in place before I was in the position of bringing the Section 5 report forward. So we did check what published decisions were in place.
Okay, thank you. I've got One last question. And as I've been thinking about this for a couple of days, because as the leader knows, this project's been at the back of my mind for a while. In Appendix B, page 35, A, B and C, it says the following report being published, there have been ongoing discussions involving the Chief Executive, Monitoring Officer, S151 Officer and the Head of Internal Audit and its initial first steps, the Chief Executive, and then it gives 3 points of action, which is which is the action being taken via the Chief Executive. My question to the leader is, what action have you taken from a cabinet perspective?
Thank you very much, Paul. Sorry, Councillor Honeywood. As soon as we found out, I spoke to my cabinet members and they've all been asked to hold discussions with their leading officers around performance, budget, risk and governance. So I want to make sure that they are, and I feel confident that they are on top of it as best they can be. I think lessons learned from a cabinet point of view, there wasn't a huge amount. We were already engaging with officers on a regular basis. Most of the cabinet meet with their officers bi-weekly, if not monthly. So we get regular updates on projects and things that go on. I think this is just one of those things that unfortunately it went wrong, and I can't say more because we're going to do the review, and I think the review will highlight why it went wrong. So I'm not going to go into that. But I would say that we've been transparent. That's what's really been obvious here. You know, we've got the Section 5, you know, we're here, we told you about it, we haven't tried to, and that was one of the things we were always keen about, transparency and sustainability was the portfolio mandate. And I think that was the important part of it. You know, there are other things that are going on all the time, and I don't think, you know, that we will have 100% assurance because it's down to people. And I think we need to be aware of that and just be okay with it. You know, so we need to have, I do feel that the project board, the portfolios, everybody is doing exactly what they should be doing, you know, and we have done a really, really good job of getting to where we are. You talk about the budget spiralling. That budget came in 2022, summer of 2022. We had some serious world economic stuff going on there. Liz Truss blew up the economy, you know, and some things went wrong because of that. Laptops died. And I'd just like to talk about, it is one project that failed. We've got successful projects as well. And I think we can really focus on what went wrong, and you can do a job as a scrutiny, and I appreciate that being the ex-scrutiny chairman, but we also get it right, and I don't think we talk about our successes well enough. Honeywood is looking very, very good for us at the moment. Sorry. Honeycroft, sorry. Honeywood, yes, that's a Freudian. Honeycroft, I even wrote it down. Yeah, we've got the senior project board in place. We've got good governance. I'm very happy with the governance around the way we do things. And as I said before, we just need to do the review and see what comes out of that. But coming back to your original question, I've had a long chat with all the cabinet in one sitting. We talked about performance, the budget, the risk and the governance. And I'm happy as they are. Nobody's raised anything with me at the moment. So I'm happy to say, yes, I've had those conversations.
Okay, thanks very much for that. So I did think about the recommendations, and I think one of the things that we need to bear in mind is that we're talking in this room, and it'll probably get coverage in the local press. But the simple truth is, this has been getting coverage in local government press nationally. That, to me, can be a problem for future projects and can be a problem for the success of this council. So I think it's important that we do take action to see that this kind of thing doesn't happen again or isn't happening again. And that's why I reflected quite long and hard on recommendations, and I hope my colleagues will support me on these. Firstly, I think we should note the actions of the tendering district council statutory officers. I think it's important we do that because they moved quite quickly. And I have 3 points. The first one, once the Chief Executive's review has been completed, Cabinet produces their lessons learned from that. 2, portfolio holders to review their performance and project management of projects and their findings to be reported to the leader and to this committee. And 3, the committee looks forward to Cabinet's formal response. And are people happy with that?
Sorry, Paul. Sorry, Councillor Hunter, but would you just mind going through that again ever so slowly so I can just fully understand the implications of it? Is that okay?
Yeah. He just wants me to read it again. That's all it is. Okay. Right. The recommendations. Firstly, to note the actions of tendering district council statutory officers. 1. Once the Chief Executive's review has been completed, Cabinet produces their lessons learned. 2. Portfolio holders to review their performance and project management of projects and their findings to be reported to the leader and this committee. And 3. The committee looks forward to Cabinet's formal response. Councillor Steady.
The lessons learned, I would prefer that to be put in such a way that we're going to have a robust plans going forward to take on board the issues with this project, and that we're going to take out everything what's been learned, and also the good reports we've had from officers to make sure that a similar situation doesn't occur in the future.
I think broadly speaking, that's what I'm trying to capture. It comes down to words. Councillor Harris?
Yeah, sorry. The item 2, which is the portfolio holders, I think you were saying reporting or updates on projects. What sort of timeline, Chairman? So I'll repeat that. Your item number 2, which is, I think you're saying that the portfolio holders have got to keep the leader or Cabinet updated with their projects. What sort of timeline? Monthly, or what? How often do they need to keep the leader updated?
What I was looking at was for the current projects, as it says, to review the performance and project management of projects. So the current projects that the portfolio holders are dealing with. That's what I'm talking about. So we can think of some in hand. He's going to read my mind, I know he is. I'll say CCTV. That's a project that's currently underway. That's a project that's currently behind schedule, and at the back of my mind is probably over budget. But that's just me, and I'd love to be proven wrong, but obviously the Cabinet member can look at that, report to yourself in this committee, is everything fine? Just one example. Obviously there's a little bit of a debate about this. We're holding you here. If you'd like to go, we can take a short recess. We can discuss among ourselves. Is there anything you'd like to add? No, I wasn't thinking of a recommendation. I was just thinking, is there anything you want to add? I mean, I put myself in your position. Mr. Davison has apologised on behalf of the council. Does the same apply to Cabinet?
I think I'm going to wait for the review to see what actually went wrong. and then I know what I'm apologising for. So, you know, I think to sit there and ask for an apology when we have no idea what went wrong is a bit premature.
Okay, that's absolutely fine. Okay, shall we take a 5-minute recess? Chief Exec.
Sorry, Chairman. I am going to say that we take this as the statutory officers very seriously. We issued a Section 5 notice, which was issued by the monitoring officer, Mrs Hastings, with the Section 151 officer, in consultation with, as it says in the report, and full support of that. So I think that all the things which, and the reason why I said I've put in place the things I've done, which was strong response, is because we take it very seriously. We've talked all about the importance of the scheme, and I wouldn't doubt that for 1 second, and I think you've all agreed that. I think that the issues of what happened we take very seriously, and we will be looking to make sure that it doesn't happen again. You're right to highlight that on occasions there will be other schemes and it will be then there will be have the appropriate decisions being taken, and if not, why not? And I know you raise one. I'm not going to name any particular one, but I'll just say is that we take it very seriously, and where officers have made an error of not doing that, I take that on board, and we will come back to you with the clear outcome of the review.
Thank you very much. Okay, well, on behalf of the committee, thanks very much for taking the time to come along this evening, and wish you all a safe journey. We'll have a 5-minute recess.
You're ignoring the chief.
Okay. Thank you for anyone who's waited while we discussed this. I think we've discussed this in depth and we've come to final recommendations. Could I ask you to read those out?
Thank you, Chairman. So there's a mixture of actual just decisions of this committee and some recommendations, but I'll just read out the wording as you've talked about through the committee. And firstly is to note the actions of the 3 statutory officers. This is obviously to do with the Spendles case and the reports that you've got in front of you. Number 2 is once the Chief Executive's review has been completed, that Cabinet reports on its lessons learned and also addresses the issue of the financial breakdown of the 7 missing items from the specification. Again, all of that set out in the report. Subject to that, the report from Cabinet on lessons learned should articulate a robust response and an action plan going forward. Fourthly, portfolio holders should review their performance and project management on their existing projects with their corporate directors and report their findings to the leader by the end of September 2024 and this committee at its following ordinary meeting. Fifth is the committee looks forward to reviewing the Cabinet's formal response as part of its recommendations monitoring. And sixth, it notes that the Audit Committee of the Council is also undertaking its own inquiry into this project and the response to it, and that there may be scope for any combined exercise going forward. Chairman.
I'm happy with that. Is everybody happy with that? Do we have a proposer and a seconder? Okay. All agreed? Thanks very much. So we now move to item 6, which is review of the work programme. Do we have any comments, thoughts on this?
Chairman, just obviously at Appendix A, starting on page 21, you have the proposed work programme that has been developed through your informal meetings, following the consultation with the public and taking on board some of the suggestions that came through that. These have been worked up into the document that you have before you. On page 21, it details the Spendles review, which you've now completed. So the intention would not be to include that in the work programme that gets submitted to the 6th of August meeting at full council. So with that change, it's before you to consider, and if it's your intention to then approve that, to be recommended on to full council. I will also just put, as far as an articulated value of undertaking the review, on page 25, the pre-budget scrutiny, to add in some words around the importance of scrutiny in relation to the budget and services and functions funded through the budget, and addressing those rigorously, and the sense that the inquiry will test assumptions in the medium-term financial strategy. So with those additions, just so that it ensures that the scope is completed as far as it's submitted to full council, that's in front of you now, and as I say, that's been to your informal meetings.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Are we happy to move forward with that? Do I need a proposer and a seconder? Could I have a proposer and a seconder for the work programme? Thank you, Graham. And Sue? Okay, I think that's the final item on the agenda.
Yes, Chairman, the recommendations monitoring, I note that that includes some material that has already been reported to you. So I think we owe you the responsibility of reporting back on the recommendations monitoring around the matters set out in your agenda minutes from page 7. So the NEPP and Treasury Management That'll be covered in the next report that you receive, just those recommendations monitoring. So just really a note, Chairman.
Okay, thanks very much for that. And thank you all for attending tonight, and apologies for it going on a little longer than we probably anticipated. But as I say, thanks again for coming, and I wish you all a safe journey home.